All right, welcome to part 2 of the Twitter clone video series. So we are picking up where we left off from part 1, covering creating a Twitter clone on our own from scratch with HTML, CSS, and using the Bootstrap framework. So we're going to, so if you missed part 1, you can, jump back to that. If you missed any specific parts in the table of contents, there's links to, specific elements on the page so far. So if you need to jump back and see how I did something, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we're going to pick off where we left off. Specifically, we've already covered the navigation part at the top. We've covered the cover photo and the profile photo here, and this bar here with kind of the tweet stats and this follow button. So we've got that. So we're going to start here in this video on this left-hand column. So if we jump over to our Twitter reference, we're going to, add this sort of bio information, add this tweet button, do this section here with the followers, and then as well as this photos and videos. We're not really going to worry about the rest of this for the scope of the assignment, but that's what we're going to. And then the next video will cover the actual tweets. Okay, so let's jump in. I've worked ahead a little bit, so I'm going to kind of reference some of this code down here that I've commented out. But essentially, we're going to start by creating a container. So if you remember with Bootstrap, when we use the container class on a div, when we use this container class, it creates a 12-column layout for us. So that's kind of instantiating the 12-column layout, and then within that we need to do div class of row, and then we create our columns within those rows. Specifically, we're going to do call-4 because we're going to create kind of a 4-span column and then an 8-span column. So we've got our column 4. And then column 8 for the tweets. I think I actually covered this a little bit at the end of the last video. So this may just be recap. But here we'll put our bio info, and here we'll put our tweets. So let's make sure that this one went into effect. Again, as a reminder, we're dealing with this kind of 2-column layout. If your browser is full width, it jumps over to a 3-column layout. We're trying to keep the scope of this assignment a little bit smaller, just to save some time. So if you resize your browser window a little bit to where it's smaller, you'll get that 2-column layout. And the same goes for our Twitter page here. If you make your browser just a little bit smaller, so you get that 2-column size. I think it'll be the same, but if you make it bigger, it might work a little bit differently. So, all right, so let's refresh and make sure we've got that. My internet's running a little slow. Okay, so we've got an issue here. Call 4. Close. Oh, there we go. I had a slash that was causing an issue. Okay, cool. It's often, just as a pro tip, if you see something weird on your page and you're like, I don't know why that's happening, 9 times out of 10, you have some sort of malformed HTML. If you forget a closing div, like if I forgot this closing div right here, that's not going to work the way that we think it will. It's going to be, strange, right? Like the way that it's kind of moved over. If you see strange things on your page, really carefully look at your HTML, because most likely you've done, some small thing that may be a little bit hard to notice that is going to cause that issue. So up here on this top part, let's go ahead and give it an ID so that we can target, this div as the profile. And we'll go ahead and give this one an ID of tweets. So now the first thing that we need to think about is the username here. So we've got, or at least the name followed by the username. So these are technically headings. I would think, especially the name here, it's obviously larger, more prominent, but it's also kind of a heading to, the rest of the content here in this section, and certainly the content on the rest of the page. And this is sort of a subheading in a sense in that it's, secondary to the name, but it's still kind of part of, the heading for this section. So we're actually going to use H group here, which is one of the HTML5 elements that we've learned that lets us group headings together so we can move them together. And then additionally, if you look at, the way these work, they're actually links. So you can click on either of these to go to, it's actually the same page that we're on now, but these are links to the Twitter page. So we want to have our heading inside of this link. So we'll start with the A, just an empty href, and then we'll do our heading. I'll double check that I spelled my own last name there correctly. And then we'll close our A. And then let's maybe use an H2 for the handle, since it's a subheading. Close our H2 and close our A. Okay, now obviously if we pull this up, oops, it's not going to be styled how we want by default, right? So, the headings are much larger by default than we want. The color isn't correct. So we're going to do some CSS for that. I've already written some of the CSS, so I'm going to just kind of uncomment it. Okay, so the first thing that we did was add some margin top to this profile section. So you notice, the name here is, covering up this profile image, whereas, there's some space here in the real thing. So by adding that little bit of margin top, we'll pull all of the content down. Next, we'll style the H1. So again, we're just targeting the H1 element inside of this profile div. We're setting the color to be a little bit of a dark gray, a pretty dark gray actually, almost black. I think that's, if you look at Bill Gates here, it's not quite full black, but it's pretty close. And then the handle is obviously a little bit lighter. So I set the font size, 1.2 ems, which is a little bit smaller than H1 by default. We're also going to make it bold. Then we can also style our H2 here. So we're going to make it, again, 1em, which is just kind of your default text size. So we're bringing the size down quite a bit for the H2, making it a little bit of a lighter gray than the H1. We don't want it to be bold, and we're also going to move it up a little bit. So we're going to do position relative and then offset it from the top by -6 pixels, which is going to pull it up a little bit more, to be a little bit closer to the name. So I believe I saved, nope, save that, and then go and see what that looks like. Okay, cool. That's getting a lot closer to what we want. One thing also we need to do is this little verified check mark. So if we open up Font Awesome, actually I think I have the HTML for it here. We'll use, a Font Awesome for that. I've got it here in my commented out code. The it's fa-check-circle. So I'm just going to copy this and put it inside of my H1. Cool. So, I'm using the Font Awesome icon using the I element with the FA class for font awesome, and then FA-check-circle is a really nice check mark inside of a circle, which is pretty close to what we're looking for. Then make sure to close your eye, and let's see how that looks. Oops. There we go. Cool. That's looking good. One thing we could do also is change the color to match. It looks like here it's about the same color as the Twitter icon. So let's go to where we styled that. It's this navbar brand. So we'll take this color. Oops. And we will do profile. This is within the H1. So let's actually go ahead and put this up here. Again, we just like to keep our CSS somewhat logical. So, we style the H1, then right after that, let's style the I within the H1, and then style the H2. So do this, and actually, let's be a little bit more specific here and say FA. So we don't want to just style any eyes, even though we don't have any other eyes inside this H1, and it's unlikely that we will. It's a little bit clearer here what we're trying to do. If you're just reading the CSS, you can see here, okay, they're styling the font awesome font rather than just the I. So we'll do that, and we're going to say color is this guy, 1D1F2. Save that. Cool. That's good. Our colors here, you could probably style the tag or the handle a little bit closer if you wanted to. I think this is fine for now. But again, if you want to go kind of above and beyond and really make an exact match, you could probably get a little bit closer. But let's go ahead and move on. So now we've got a paragraph here, followed by 3 kind of different profile info. So let's go ahead and put our paragraph in. Let's see. This is kind of the about us. So I'm a baby. I like to sleep and eat. Okay. And then after that, let's use spans for our these little details. So little elements like this are kind of difficult to know how to put into HTML because it's kind of just it's not exactly a paragraph. These are just short little snippets. But div, we could just put this as text inside of a div, but that's not super semantic. We generally use div to group other elements together. So maybe let's use span, which is just kind of a general purpose, shorter text element. So let's see, there's location. Oops. There is, looking down at my cheat sheet down here, website. And there is joined. Okay. Each of these also has an icon with it. So let's do our I class FA, yeah, FA map marker. So we'll use this FA map marker class to get kind of a map marker icon. Add a space there. This is an I believe FA link. And then this is actually an A as well. And then down here, there is FA calendar. Make sure you put a space after your icons as well, just so that there's a little bit of space between them and your text. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Oops. Okay, cool. So one thing that you'll notice is that our spans here, spans by default are inline. So they don't get a new line break by default. They just kind of flow in line with the content. So one option would maybe be to put break tags in between these, but we want to avoid break tags as much as possible. So the better way to do this, going to uncomment this, is to target the spans and change display from inline to block. So we've done display block, which now forces those elements to get a new line, and they act a little bit more like block elements. So you can see I've also changed the color, changed the font size. I've also given them some bottom margin to space them out a little bit better. Let's go ahead and uncomment the rest of these as well. So I've taken my paragraph, added some margin top to space it out a little bit from the elements above it, as well as set the font size a little bit smaller. Let's see, I've also set the width of the icons. And again, maybe instead of doing I, we'll do .fa just to make it really clear that we're targeting the Font Awesome fonts, or the Font Awesome icons. So setting the width here, let me show you what it looks like without this. So let's go ahead and refresh. Okay, so you can see here without the width set on these icons, there's an unevenness. One, they need to be spaced out a little bit more. And two, some of the icons are wider than the others. These two here below are wider than this one on top. And so they just don't line up really good. Whereas when you look at the real Twitter, these are really aligned. It helps that their map marker icon's a little wider, but there's a really good alignment here. So we can do that by setting the width of that Font Awesome icon so that they'll all be consistent. They'll all take up consistent width, and it's a little bit wider than what the default would be. So if we refresh, there we go. We see that they're a little bit more spaced out, and they also are consistent and aligned. So that's really good. Okay, from here, let's look at the we've got this tweet button. So let's do that. We can go ahead and copy the tweet button from our header, because it's the same styling. Tweet to Bill Gates is the same as this tweet up here. So let's go ahead and grab that. It's an A. We've used the so here's a good example of where we've used an ID for tweet button, but in this case there's actually more than one tweet button. So let's go ahead and remove this as an ID and add it as a class instead, so that we can have more than one of them. And now let's copy this and go down here and add it here. And I believe it needs to be tweet to Bill Gates. So tweet to Rose. So, and then we need to adjust our CSS. If you just search for tweet button, And then let's actually make this class tweet button rather than ID, since there are more than one of them now. Okay, cool. So let's see what that looks like. Yep. Okay, so it's pretty close. We want to go ahead and make it, take up the full width. And we also want to maybe give it a little bit of margin. So let's target then. Go down here to the bottom. And let's say profile.tweet button, because we don't want to target all the tweet buttons, just the specific one. And this is a good way of doing that. We're targeting the class tweet button, but only inside of the profile section. And then we're going to say, let's see, margin top, maybe 12 pixels or so. Let's say width of 100%. So it's going to take up the full width. And maybe that's all we need. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think these have a border around them that I don't think we need. Let's fix that real quick. Yeah, you can tell there's a little bit of a dark blue border around both of these. And I don't think that we need any border at all. So let's go back up here to our main tweet button and just do border none. And see if that fixes it. Yeah, there we go. That's a lot better. Cool. Okay, so now we need to think about these profile photos. So we've got a similar thing here, span with an icon and a link. So we can use the same type of pattern there. So let's take this span. Paste it here. And then this is going to be an A. Copy this and delete it. Close our A. And this is what, let's see, Rose has a lot of followers. So let's say 99 followers, I believe that's what it's supposed to be, right? Yeah, we can. Don't need to capitalize those. And then instead of FA calendar, let's try, we're just guessing here, FA user, and see if that exists. I've used Font Awesome a lot, so sometimes I can kind of guess which ones, what the names. There we go, good. Okay, so we might add some margin bottom to this tweet button as well. So let's go to our profile. Let's do margin bottom of 12 pixels as well. Just to space it out a bit. There we go. Cool. Now we need the actual images. So we use placehold it. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this whole div here from my cheat sheet. And put it right after that span. Cool. So what I've done, just to go over this with you. So first I created a div with ID of follower profile photos, so I can target that div. And then I've got 5 images. The source is via.placeholder.com/50 by 50. So that's just the placeholder image, and we're saying we want 50 pixels by 50 pixels for square. We need to make sure we have an alt, so follower profile photo. So I've got 5 of them, and then I went ahead and used a break tag, and this is a good example of where break tag is useful to, just separate a new line. We could maybe put a class on the sixth one, that says new line or something, and break it down. But honestly, a break tag is just kind of the easiest way to go ahead and say, okay, we need a new line here in the midst of these elements. I don't really have a problem with using a break tag in this type of instance. So let's go ahead and save that and see where we're at. Okay, cool. So we've got some photos, and they're about the right size. They, line up pretty well because images are inline by default, so we don't need to float them in or anything. We need to maybe add some margin, and we need to make them circles. So let's go to our style, and if we go and uncomment this, we've added some border radius. Remember, the border radius needs to be half of the height and width to achieve a circle. And then we've added a little bit of margin bottom just to space out the first row from the second row. So let's go ahead and refresh. And there we go. That's pretty close. You could, if you wanted to, maybe break this out into another column layout, or figure out the percentage widths that they would each need to be to, fit 5 of them and be a little more flexible. Because here they don't take up the full width, and as your page gets wider, these really should maybe expand a little bit to fill up all the room that they have. But that's okay. For now, this is good enough. We're getting, it's pretty close. If you really wanted to, you could, build a little bit more of a flexible layout with, say that each of them is, 20% wide and stuff like that, and kind of get a little bit more of a flexible layout. But for now, this will do the trick. So now we need the photos and videos. So let's do the same thing that we did here. We'll just copy the span again and put it here. Let's try FA image, maybe. Again, I'm just guessing. And then, let's see, maybe 100 photos. Oops. Photos and videos. Let's see if that icon class is correct. Cool. That's exactly what we wanted. Good. Photos and videos. So I believe it's 3. Yeah, so we've got 3 followed by 3 more. So let's go ahead and do placehold.it. Actually, this time let's do, so let's first do a wrapper div. ID is photos and videos. And then let's do image. And let's actually, just to make it a little more interesting, let's use place kitten. Yeah, if you just search, I can't remember what the URL is, placekitten.com. So we use this, a little bit different format than placeholder. So it's placekitten.com / and then your height and then your width, I believe. But in our case, we want them to be the same. We actually want them to only be around 100 by 100. And then let's do an alt 2. Twitter or tweeted photo. Really, the alt should be a little more descriptive, but in this case, it's fine. So let's do 3, and let's use the same strategy and then do a break tag. Again, this is kind of the lazy way. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Oops. Okay, so I think, and I noticed this actually here, there should be, the PlaceKitten images up here. I think PlaceKitten's having some issues, so let's actually copy this guy. We'll go ahead and use placeholder it. So copy this, Command D, and we'll paste this, and then we want this to be 100 by 100 or so. Click to get away, and then let's check that out. Okay, and so now our images work. We've got our line break where we want it. You notice the images are a little too wide, so it's breaking before all three. All three can't fit, so we need to size them down a little bit and maybe add some margin. We also need to do the border radius. The corners are slightly rounded on these guys, so I'm going to uncomment here from my cheat sheet. So we've set width to 32%. Technically it should be 33.3%. I actually spent some time, trying to get that to work. Bootstrap does some kind of weird things for you that causes some extra space to be added. So 32% works great. It's close enough for our purposes. We've added a little bit of margin bottom to separate the top row from the bottom row. This is, again, just to the images. We've added some border radius to make them rounded. We've added box sizing border box, which again helps with the spacing a little bit. That changes the way that the width is calculated to include the padding and margin as well. So if we refresh now, that's getting a lot better. So we've got our images, and they're looking pretty close. For the purposes of the assignment, it'd be great if you found some actual images to use here, or found a better placeholder service that provided some real images rather than just these kind of empty ones. But overall, this is pretty good. So this is about all we really need to do, honestly, for our sidebar. A couple of things, and actually we can go ahead and do this now. Let's change the colors of our links to be maybe even the same as our tweet button. Let's go up here to tweet button, and then this background color. I like to put global things all the way at the top, so we've got our body, maybe even honestly before the body. Anything that's global over the whole page. Let's maybe just take all A's and set that as a default color. Now, the nice thing about that is, anything below this that overrides it, great. There's probably going to be a couple links here. For instance, our H1s and our H2s on our profile, this is going to override, even though it's not targeting the actual A. At least it should. So those shouldn't get changed. So let's double check. I'm only doing that because, you look at the link here, that's the same color as these. A lot of the actual, this link here, we're not actually building out this part of the site, but all these links seem to be that same color. So let's refresh. Cool, that's good. So that changed these, all these links. We can change the hover to, it's honestly the same color. So we'll just say A, comma, A hover is that same color. There we go. So now it doesn't change color when we hover it, but it does underline. So it's showing some indication that it's something you can click on without changing the color. So just to do a quick summary of what we've done so far, If you look here, we've got a div container. So this is for, the everything under the header, essentially. We've created a row. We've created a 4-span column for the profile info. We used heading group, and then H1 and H2, both wrapped in links for our name and Twitter handle. We used a FA check circle icon for the verified check. We did a paragraph for our, kind of bio. We used spans with an icon for this kind of different profile information. We used an A with a tweet button and these button classes for the tweet button. We did a span kind of as the label for this followers section. We've got a div for that, 5 images with a break tag, kind of separating out the rows there. Did the same kind of span for this label for the photos and videos. Same thought here with the images with the break tag. And then again, for part 3, we'll cover what goes actually here in tweets. So jumping back to our CSS, one thing that we did was globally change the color of all of our A's. We also changed our tweet button from the last video. This was an ID. We changed this to a class so we could use it in multiple places. And then going down here to the profile section, we added some margin top to bring all the content down a little bit, give some space between it and the profile image. We changed the style of the H1 and the H2 that we used for the name and the Twitter handle. So changed the font size, made this one bold. We also changed the color of the Font Awesome icon in the H1, the little check mark for verified, to be blue. We styled the H2, did some minor styling to the paragraph here. We changed our spans in this profile section to display blocks, so they would each get a new line. Changed the font size, spaced them out a little bit with margin. We set the width to all the icons in those spans to be equal so that they would be spaced out evenly, specifically so the content after the icon would all be aligned. We styled this tweet button. We did width 100% to make it, the full width of its column, and add some margin around it. We took these images here, used border radius to make them circular, added some bottom margin. Then for the images on the photos and videos, we made the width, a little bit less than 33%, so that there's a little bit extra room in there. For some weird bootstrap stuff that's happening. We set some margin bottom to kind of space it out, border radius to make them rounded, and then again box sizing, border box, which changes the way the width is calculated and lets us account for some of the padding and stuff that Bootstrap's putting in there for us. So, all right, so that's it. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you for part 3.